Hey everybody, Greg Refner on the Contact Center KPI podcast. Today we have Bernie Miller. Bernie has 20 years experience in the contact center world, and we're going to be talking about attrition today, specifically agent attrition. We're going to dive into the three kind of parts of attrition with Bernie. So Bernie, please say hi.
Hi.
Give us a little bit of background of yourself, kind of what you've done for 20 plus years.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, my name is Bernie Miller, as Greg already said. I have been in the contact center arena for over 20 years. My very first contact center was actually selling toys, believe it or not. Sold skateboards, the world's largest skateboard shop. From there, I've sold mortgages. I've taken care of customer care, tier two support. I've handled some of the biggest vendors on the earth, basically. Verizon Wireless, the number one telco place. I had 2,000 employees out of a 5,000 seat footprint, and my last stint was with Cinch Home Services. We were handling a home warranty product. So today, after Greg and I spoke, we decided to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts about how to improve attrition. I learned a lot over the past 20 years on what to look for and what to not do in attrition. And I really am a firm believer that, this is a people business. It talks like it's a technology business because there's so much technology wrapped around it, but it's really human beings speaking to each other, and how do you treat each other while you're on the phone as a customer to agent, and then how do you do the same when you're that person's boss or supervisor, whatever the level is. So I've always been a believer in really focusing on do a lot more listening than you do talking, right? And everybody says that. I mean, sales guys all tell you that, the 80-20 rule, all that stuff. But you find that in a lot of sites, it tends to be, let's just get these KPIs by commandment, right? Let's just go get them. Just go do it. I don't need to know why or how, just go make it happen. But you have to have that agent employee buy-in and that encompassing process that makes them understand, yeah, there's a progression path here. No, I'm not going to always be on the phones taking high-end customer care calls or, getting barked at by somebody. There's more to this, and I can probably turn this into a career if I work at it. So I think that kind of all encompassing, from the time when you try to find somebody to the time that they're actually in the site or working remote or what have you, and delivering your products and services, that entire performance envelope from start to finish, it matters. And the littlest things can really make a big difference.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's when we were prepping for this, Bernie, you had shared some interesting stories, some
Yeah.
successes you've had. I want to dive into those a little bit in a minute, but you're kind of hinting at an overall kind of thesis or approach to looking at attrition.
Right.
So kind of let's dive into what was the catalyst? Like, what's the genesis of how you began to think about attrition? Let's
Yeah.
kind of start there.
I think the primary process when I'm on assignment or I've come into a place that needs help is to really step back and just kind of listen and look and see what the interactions human being wise are. What is that? If you're in a remote situation, you're going to be stuck with looking at a lot of data points, right? And I build my own, so I'm very familiar and fluid with them. But that doesn't mean you can't hop on and listen to dozens, if not hundreds of calls to try and get a sense for what it is that you guys are hearing. When you're in a brick and mortar, go out on the floor. All you have to do is stay out there for about an hour and you're going to get a very good sense for what's going on. Go to the break room, just listen to what people are saying. That feedback that you absorb in that first step is crucial. I've also found that I need to know who my HR partner is and what that flow of human capital, both in and out, look like, right? Are the agents quitting me, or am I having to quit the agents? Two different tracks to look at, right? If the agents are quitting me, I really need to look at my processes, my people, the leadership to find out what's disconnecting, right? If I'm having to unload them, then I really have to take a harder look at, well, what happened at the front? Something's not right. It's just a disconnect between the employee, and I have to let you go because. So I really feel that it's that front end analysis. Don't just start making changes. Go in and look and try and see where the disconnects are. And then when you see the one in a medical sense, if you're triaging the floor, what needs help now, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Whatever that is, you need to address that.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, really, it's cliche, but seek to understand before being understood. And so, coming in, barking orders, like you do have to spend some time listening and just observing. And I mean, I think that goes to just anything in life, right?
Yeah,
Like you want to understand what's going on, why is it happening, and
right.
just plant yourself in a chair in a break room, and you'd be
Yeah,
amazed at some of the stuff that I'm sure you would hear.
yeah,
So I absolutely respect that, and I agree with that. So. You mentioned like you make your own KPIs and you'll kind of pull some data out that
yeah,
you've found is important.
yeah.
Without giving away all your secrets, what are maybe one or two things that you kind of look for, and what are some of the things that you like to start measuring on day one?
Yeah, I think the first things I'm going to measure is I'm going to start at the macro level. Okay, what is my attrition rate? How much trouble are we really in? Is it 2% or is it 40 or 50%? Once you know what that is, then you can start looking at some other things. What do the customers think of us? So kind of start to weave in together what's our NPS score. So what's that final result of the call? So you're looking at the macro, then you're looking at the back end of the call and saying what happened, right? And I take that NPS score, and then the next thing I look at is what did the agent disposition that call as? What did they think happened in the call? So now I'm getting that other layer of saying, okay, now I know what the customers think. I know what our attrition rate is, and now I know what the agent thinks of that telephone call. Now I'm getting a little bit different, kind of
There's
filtering.
usually a delta. There's usually a delta
There
there,
is.
right?
There always is. And you find all kinds of interesting things. One of the places I was assigned to, I said, okay, can I just see the list of dispositions? And they said, oh, sure, here it is. And they sent it to me. There were 800 dispositions. I said, no
That
one's going to get to the bottom of this, right?
doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, that's not going to work. Um, so once you kind of have those KPIs that were given to you, right? If you're new on assignment, even if you've been there a while, it's like, okay, let's just step back and take a look at this thing. It just doesn't seem to be, it's not working properly, right? It's out of balance somewhere. And I had a mentor who was an IBM fast tracker from the old days. And he said, you just got to build black box. There's inputs and the output. The output is you're either making money or you're taking care of calls, whatever it is. But what's my, I've got a black box here, but there, if I open the lid, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's in there, and some of it's working and some of it's not. We need to get into that before we close it back up and say this black box works. Let's replicate, build another one.
Yeah. So, okay. So, agent attrition, like,
Yep.
isn't it crazy to think like you said 40 or 50% kind of anecdotally, but there
I've seen.
actually are customers out there or vendors out there that have,
Yeah.
you know, that,
I've,
that that's a thing. And so it's
right.
not something to joke about,
No.
which is just crazy to think about.
Yeah.
So we start looking at agent attrition, build our black box,
Right.
and then you take that data and then kind of what do you do with that? Once
All
you
right.
have that, what do you
I'll
do?
give you a real world example. I was assigned to a fairly large call center in a very small central of the country site. The town had 6,000 people. I had a 600 plus seat site, and we were bleeding at about 40 to 45%. That was month over month. And with such a small population in the geographic location, it was not good, right? And at that point, when you're in that position, almost none of the other KPIs matter because you're bleeding so bad that you can't keep the building open, right? You're going to be out of people in a couple of weeks. So when you are in that kind of triage situation, the very first thing I did, and I've done in the past, is I went directly to the recruiting team. We need more. Let's get a radio spot in here. Let's get you and me out on the street. Let's go to some of the local places. Let's really kind of rev it up. And the reason you do that is you need to keep that flow on the front end big enough so that you can go and address whatever the other broken parts of the production line are, right? Because it's working, but it's not working properly, and you're losing them almost faster than you're getting. So that's what I did in my situation. And I said, look, in the next 60 to 90 days, we have to stabilize and increase the flow volume. And I said, once that's kind of at that good spot, then I'm going upstream and you're just going to keep feeding me. And I said, in about 6 months, I'll be back and I'll tell you, here's the kind of quality I need, right? Because
Okay.
I know that I can stop some of it just by handling the people equation, but I can't do it without that flow on the front end. So once I worked with my recruiting guy, he and I worked really closely together. I mean, we were out in the neighborhood all the time. Um, and of course that partners with HR because they're going to have a lot more paperwork to do. But then it's go out to each one of the different parts of your operation and say, all right, what are we missing? Where is it? Do I have good leaders, or do I have leaders that are being overly difficult with the employees and the employees are quitting me more quickly than I can keep them? So whatever that equation is, I went through every single department of the company. So I started at the recruiting team, went over to the training team to see what was happening there, if that's maybe where we were losing them. From there, went out to the operations side of the floor to say, how are we doing? What, and there were some areas within in that building that weren't losing anybody. I mean, they'd been there for years, the same agents, same stuff. And so I really took a closer look at that and said, what's the difference over here, right? Because it was a smaller subset of my overall larger operation. And it really kind of turned out that the team was interested in the product, which was kind of fun because that charged them up. So now they want to come to work because it's important to them.
There was some buy-in, right? They felt connected to it. Yeah.
Exactly. And so as you move through that process, and there were a few leaders that needed to be either sidelined or moved to another role. Not particularly they need to be clipped, but they definitely needed work, mentorship, conversation, right? They got promoted for whatever the reason was, but they just really weren't the right fit. So as I started to work through those other pieces and kept the flow on the front end, it actually happened faster than I thought. I think my initial timetable was just based on the volume of people we had in the nearby area. I wasn't sure whether we could keep up with the flow, and he was able to do that. So it really turned out in about 45 days, we had stabilized the inbound applicant flow and hires. And from there, we moved into the quality side and we started moving the quality uphill. We really took that site. I was able to completely take it from the lowest performing site in the central region to the number 2 performing site in the central region within 12 months. And that was all, and it was a BPO arrangement, and I had 7 separate organizations under one roof. So I had different quality measures, different, the workforce guys were usually pulling their hair out because there was so much going on and different times, start times, close times, what have you. But to magnify that, I realized pretty quickly that the big points of my attrition were, as always, they started with the shrink, right? People started calling in sick. They, for whatever reason, they didn't really give you a reason. They just called in sick. Are you really sick? Come on to work. I help me out. Get in here. So as you and I talked earlier, what I identified, and it didn't really seem to take very long. The numbers were giant, but it didn't take as long as I thought either. There were 3 primary reasons for people to quit me. And that boiled down to transportation, daycare, and believe it or not, calories, food. So as I identified these 3 pieces, we built infrastructure to help with that. I actually worked with the local area bus people to try and help with the transportation, giving them a discount. I said, look, if I pay you, a monthly amount, and you can get some of these folks from these, remote areas in here, it's worth it to me, right? And then, correspondingly, you're gonna work with workforce. So there's this, it's an enmeshed process, and it's in the entire site. So if I know this guy's going to show up an hour late because he's coming by bus from a very long way away, I'll still take his help. I need to adjust his schedule, right? I'm just not going to say, oh, you should be here and then mark you late all the time. I'm not going to fix any of it, right?
Yeah.
So the daycare side, we also built in a process where we had people who lived nearby who were willing to transport others in, and it was just kind of a swap board. Hey, I'm driving in tomorrow. Anybody need a ride? Then I established just a process that was a reward for anybody that would show up to work on time every single day, right? And and since there are 7 different companies, get a good quality score. And we measure that quality differently at all 7 of them because, sometimes NPS is the 1 to 5 and sometimes it's 1 to 100. It just depends on each one of the companies. And I said, look, if your score is 90% or better and you show up to work on time and you work your full shift, I said, I'll give you not only a certain amount of monopoly money, but I will also give you free food the following day. So I'll pay for your lunch. So I had an on-site kitchen, which was a benefit. Not a lot of sites have that. But I worked with the restaurant owner and I said, look, I need you to do the following for $3 or less. And I said, give them something to eat. And, like a sandwich, a little bit of fruit, something that a little starch, something that can hold you over for the day. So when I put all of these processes together, that 40% turned into an average of 8. The attrition level
That's crazy.
And so that unloads the front end. So now my recruiting team can focus on the quality side, right? You're not just scrambling, taking anybody. Now you can be a little bit more picky. You can go to different places. You can do a couple of other things. So what we ended up with is more revenue, more GP, because I could work you more hours. I used more overtime. I burned more overtime, but the corresponding overtime was offset because the partner was willing to pay for it because they needed to cover the shifts.
Yeah.
And as that starts to move, it's like the flywheel effect, right? You got to push on it awful hard at the front end to get it going. But once it starts going, it kind of takes on a life of its own. Yeah. So as we did that, the partner started to see the scores go up, the NPS scores, the KPIs, all of the SLAs were lined up. They started giving me more business. Now I got a different kind of problem. I was like, oh, shoot, now they're giving me more business. I need to fill with people and I got to get them in there, the high quality folks, and then keep those too, right? So as it starts to really catch up with itself, then the dynamics of your leadership team change and they can focus their efforts on other things.
So when you were talking about this in our prep call, Bernie, I just kept thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
Right? You take care of people's ability to feed themselves. You take care of people's ability to kind of not have to think about their kids and what their kids are going to do all day.
Right.
Take care of their, you remove that concern of how am I going to get to work.
That's right.
And all of a sudden you free up bandwidth for people to be able to execute on their job.
Right.
And, we don't need to dive into numbers, but what your cost to actually provide those things was so minuscule compared to the throughput and the value you brought for your clients. And it's almost like why do people not see that?
Yeah.
What stops a company from recognizing
it's funny that you say that, because in that environment I was approved to kind of do the test, and the test was probably costing me a grand total of about 10 grand a month, which is okay, you're 120 grand a year. It's a decent chunk of money.
Yeah.
But as I continued to do it, I said, guys, my gross profit just rose almost 10%. I said, I was spending 10 grand, but I got a lift out of this of about almost a full 10 points. I think it was 9.9 or something like that. I said, so I think we should keep doing it, and we won't turn it into an entitlement. I mean, I can accessorize it and make it a little bit more stringent, right? I can raise the bar a little bit, say, hey, you got to work an hour overtime every single day for me, or something else I can add to that to keep it interesting for the employee, as well as still make it palatable. Plus, it still gets us what we're looking for, which is on-time delivery, meet all of our SLAs. The company decided that they did not want to proceed. And a kind of a tough story happened when I kind of told everybody, okay, we have to unwind this, and this is what's happening. I had a guy come up to me and he says, okay, so what am I going to do? And I said, well, I hope you come to work tomorrow. I don't know. What do you mean? And he said, what am I going to do for lunch? And I kind of looked at him and I said, well, I brown bag every day. So I said, I assume you might want to do the same thing. He says, no, you don't understand. He said, that's all the food I get a day is what you provide me. And he said, so what am I going to do? And I said, well, first off, I'm glad you told me so that I didn't go along thinking that, everything was fine. I said, I'll make sure you get fed. Don't worry about it. I said, that's on me. And we worked out a scenario where we had, a little, not much, right? We did kind of ramen and stuff like that we could have really, easily afford, because nobody's going to go hungry in a place like that. Not in this country. That's silly. So companies get a little short-sighted because they keep focusing on, okay, I got to know what my EBIT number is, and I got to know what my GP number is, and I got to know what my bottom line is final. And hey, got to watch that top line too. But they don't, it's the next layer up from a macro level of what you see when you come back in and say, what's going on with the attrition side, or, hey, just go get those SLAs. It doesn't really work unless you kind of put that human element back into it and say, this is important. This really matters to people. And we do have a long range business. Let's make it a long range business. We can make this happen.
I mean, in a town of 6,000 people, like you start talking to people about, hey, they're taking care of me.
Right.
Like good news and
Right.
good karma spreads just as like
Oh,
bad news does. And
yeah.
so
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like that person who's like, oh, I'm too good for a call center.
Right.
Now they're
Right.
like, oh, wait, I can get to work and they're gonna
Right.
feed me if I do
Right.
well. Like, oh, maybe I want to go explore working there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like it's that
A,
flywheel again.
a fun ancillary story to that, in the same place, with the monopoly money that we were giving to everybody based on their attendance and quality. um, we were giving them branded gear, which is fine, t-shirts, hats, whatever, right? And they said, well, what about if you want us to have a purple shirt? I'm like, I don't care what color it is, as long as you guys are interested in it, you can go and, we'll order purple shirts that are embroidered.
Yeah.
So as we started to magnify that program over time, I'll never forget what happened is a woman walked in and she said, I need to know. She walked in, the same recruiter, and he and I were kind of the heat behind the whole process, right? And he said, "You're not gonna believe what she said." And I said, "Well, tell me." And he said, she just walks in, looks me right in the eye, and she says, "Who are you and what do you do?" And he started laughing. He said, "Well, why?" And she said, "Because I just came to town to go to college here." She said, "When I opened up the welcome packet, your company's name's inside. When I went to the dorms, door hangers on every single dorm door." She said, when I got on the college radio, you guys are advertising on college radio. When I went to Walmart in town, there's people in the parking lot with your shirts and your grocery bags walking. Well, who are you and what do you do? And so he told her who we were and what we did. And he said, by the way, we're hiring. And so, because that's how he operated. And the fun part about all of that is we out marketed without having to do anything for it, right? I made it comfortable for the employee to want my stuff, right? They want to advertise on my shirt. It says, hey, I'm blah, blah, blah. They wanted to do that. And they wanted to do that because I was taking care of them. And that
Yeah.
fed back, that feedback loop, just like the start when I went in and said, okay, we're in big trouble here with recruiting. I don't know if we can keep up with this or not. But by the time we got to the far end of it, when that engine had started really revving, it turned into something very interesting, and it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I mean, just even beyond just the day-to-day metrics. I mean, you can't imagine like um, the impact of, hey, this mom can now feed herself, which
That's right.
means she can take care of her kids, who can then do this and go on to make a better life. Like,
That's right.
just think of the impact that some of that stuff probably had outside of just the work,
Oh yeah,
the
it
workplace.
absolutely matters. I can't tell you how many times I hired moms and sons and daughters all in the same group,
Yeah.
and they just all rode to work together in the same car. So it it really does matter. And
That,
and paying attention to the people element. It's, again, we started this conversation. This is a people business. It's not all KPIs and SLAs and just go get them. It's more than that.
yeah, I would agree with that. Well, Bernie, we're coming up on time. We went way longer than normally do, but I think this has been tremendously valuable and powerful that a lot of people need to hear this and that it's okay to do these types of things. So, Bernie, final kind of word of wisdom. If one of our listeners is listening and thinking like, hey, I have a nutrition problem I need to solve. Um, what can I do like today, like tactically? I always struggle
Yeah,
tactfully. Um, what can I do today to try to start to move the needle on that?
I think that's a really good question, but I think a quick hit fix to help you get, especially if you're in the site and it's starting to have that happen, is to start intercepting those who are going to quit. Either move your desk or move your office or move HR, whoever gets that final, hey, I'm going to quit you, I don't like you anymore. Whoever
Yeah,
gets that notification, you need to intercept that person. And at the very minimum, you just need to understand what's happening. Why are you doing that? Why did this happen? If it's not if it's not immoral, unethical, or fattening, you ought to find out the reason for it and see if you can solve it. Right? Um, if the guy or gal just says, "Hey, look, I gotta go because," or "Hey, your leader over there is really a knucklehead and he really made me upset," well, I'll move you to another leader. And you can fix some of those little things, but that feedback you start to receive, you can immediately take action on that, right? Don't let the KPIs drive your life. Sometimes those KPIs, you need to drive them and say, "Hey," because everybody knows they come from senior leadership. Sometimes you get included in that conversation at the table. Other times it's just, "Here's a piece of paper, go get these." But you need to feedback loop that and say, "There's a reason this is not working," right? It's not just, "Oh gosh, we got to BPO these call center agents." Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but there's something going on there. And I think that intercepting those quits, and you're the salesperson, you're the last sales guy, right? You need to sell them on why they should stay.
Yeah.
And in that conversation, I think you'll get the kind of the gems you need to make some quick changes, and hopefully slow that attrition down, if not get rid of it altogether.
Nice. I love that. All right, Bernie. Well, thank you for your time today. This has
You
been
bet.
awesome. I know before we hit the recording, we started talking about cyber trucks, but I'm glad we ended up here talking about how to decrease agent attrition. So I appreciate your time. I hope our listeners are going to get, I know our listeners are going to get some value out of this. And it seems like such basic stuff, but I'm glad
Yeah,
we're talking about it because it's really not. So
it's
thank
not.
you for sharing that with us today. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
All right.
Cool.
Very
Thanks,
welcome.
Bernie.
Thank you. Bye.